Sampatti Prakarana, The Quiescence, Chapter 1, Story of King Janaka. Amidst thousands of kilometers of coastline of this great country, a sandy beach, it can be any place and situated in any of the states in our Indian subcontinent. The sea, representing the state of cosmos in all its aspect, is turbulent on the surface with its waves lashing out at the rocks strewn on the beach, which are seemingly holding tightly to the ground in fear of being dragged in. The sun is a golden shining disk. The birds, the gulls, wagtails, and crows are in symphony with the movement. One can also see that the breeze is particularly violent, and the fishermen are taking advantage of its strength to venture deep in search of their catch. Amidst this grand activity within, the sea itself is silently deep or deeply silent, totally unconcerned about the intensity of the activity on the surface. The sea calls the beach stroller perpetually towards itself, with its waves gesturing the welcome, and everyone enjoys wading into the foamy water. If the stroller is also a swimmer, she or he will take the invitation little more seriously to go in to enjoy the swim and the tingling salinity. And if one is furthermore adventurous, one may even venture to explore its unknown mysteries. In fact, not only is the sea representative of the whole cosmos, but everything is. Only the example of the sea illustrates the idea rather well. Most of us wade through the vast sea called life, perhaps wetting our toes or at the most our ankles. This is when we take the life with all its immensity to be just a survival. We just keep doing what others are involved in, earning our livelihood, propagating the family, and maybe fulfilling certain social obligations by following certain norms. There are certain rare persons who venture to swim in to enjoy its movement. When they start realizing that life has some more dimensions to it than just survival and start asking deeper questions. This is when they start experiencing the salinity of life through myriad and paradoxical experiences. Rarer still are those who, having deeper priorities in life, choose to plunge into the ocean and are prepared to face any hardship or even give up their very lives. Among such innumerable persons who dare to dedicate their lives for seeking the meaning of existence and in turn understand themselves, a very few succeed in their effort. The Bhagavad Gita puts it very beautifully. Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhaye yatataamapi siddhanam kaschin mam vetti tatvatah. Among thousands of men, rarely does one strive for perfection. Even among those successful strivers, only rarely does one understand and experience me in essence. Out of such persons who succeed in experiencing the reality, only very few are able to retain their compassion for the suffering people and try to lend a helping hand, because the experience as such is so overwhelming that the person is totally lost in it. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell a parable to explain this phenomenon. Once, 4 friends in the course of their walk saw a place enclosed by a wall. The wall was very high. They all became very eager to know what was inside. One of them climbed to the top of the wall. What he saw on looking inside made him speechless with wonder. He only cried, "Ah, ah," and dropped in. He could not give any information about what he saw. The others too climbed the wall, uttered the same cry, "Ah, ah," and jumped in. Now, who could tell what was inside? The concept of Bodhisattva in the Buddha's teaching is noteworthy. The compassion to save others. That is why Sri Ramakrishna used to say, according to some people, Shukadeva only saw and touched the ocean of Brahman. He did not dive into it. That is why he could return to the world and impart religious instruction. According to others, he returned to the world of name and form after attaining the knowledge of Brahman for the purpose of teaching others. He could recite the Bhagavatam to King Parikshit and had to teach people in various ways. Therefore, God did not destroy his eye altogether. God kept in him the ego of knowledge. Only such persons who have been able to retain the eye, be it out of compassion for the suffering humanity or out of wisdom, can become bridges between the infinite and the finite. Only such persons come to be known as the Gurus, having their being in the reality, yet their feet very much on the ground. The language becomes their servant, not otherwise, as in the case of the most of us. Whatever they saw is in tune with the Vedas or any sacred scriptures, or rather, whatever they utter becomes Vedic or sacred, because all these sacred scriptures have come to us through the utterances of such persons in the sacred states of realization. The teachings of such persons have always been very simple, though they have been presented in the complicated terms by the intellectual followers and the Pandits. Buddha taught through what has come to be known as the Jataka, the stories of his previous lives. So did the Christ, who taught in simple parables and stories. So did every enlightened persons, including Sri Ramakrishna in modern times, who illustrated their teaching through day-to-day examples. This is because, by its very nature, the truth is simple, obvious, and plain, and we escape from the grip of the truth through our complicated mind with its projections like the desires and the justifications. Being receptive to the compassion of the great persons like the Buddha, the Christ, and others like them is being simple. Simplicity and innocence can not only help us in understanding what they are hinting at, but may even trigger off the very experiences of these great men. This episode, which has been aptly named as Upashama Prakarana, has very useful hints for all the seekers who have the abhipsa or the burning aspiration to quieten the mental activity. Upashama means quiescence. A phenomenon which initiates the quest in human beings is the mystery of death. It is true that most of us avoid it consciously or unconsciously because we take the death to be the culmination of life. Surprisingly, death is very much an integral part of life itself, as it is not really a culmination of life, but a change. And only when we see something change do we recognize life in it. For example, movement is inevitable for something that is alive. What happens in the moment is the change of position in space. Time is nothing but the movement between two events and so on. In this sense, death happens to us every moment, as there is a constant change at all the levels of existence. This way, a death called change is happening every moment, and the death as it is commonly understood is only a crescendo of the symphony called life. Something that has gone up has to come down, like a wave merging in the sea, or like a sound vibration merging into silence. The Buddha made a wonderful observation about life. He said that everything is subject to change, and that one cannot step into the same river twice. Even the modern high energy physicists claim that the whole of matter is nothing but the play of energy, which is in a state of perpetual flux. And what we normally experience as the solidity is only apparent. The contemporary discoveries seem to be only the echoes of the age-old understanding of our sages. Lord Buddha had said, "The entire lokas are in flames. The entire lokas are going up in smoke. The entire lokas are burning. The entire lokas are vibrating. But that which does not vibrate or burn, which is experienced by the noble ones, where death has no entry, in that my mind delights." Through this seemingly short statement, the Lord has not only uttered a very great truth, but has also given a wonderful hint to all seekers for achieving the quiescence. Lokas means a plane of consciousness. It is the very nature of all vibrations that as they come up, so do they go down. The modern science tells us that all phenomena which are experienced by the senses are vibratory in nature, that there is a kind of restless flux, and everything, including the observer, is changing. This discovery is very much in tune with our Upanishadic declarations, which indicate that the mind, the intellect, and the ahankara are vibratory in nature and are constantly changing. Unless there is something changeless, or that which transcends all change, the change cannot even be detected. So, if one tries to identify oneself with the changeless, the change ceases to have any effect. When this happens, one succeeds in attaining the Sakshi Bhava, or the witness attitude, which has been called by some as one being a watcher on the hill. Lord Buddha gave this theoretical background only to clarify the practical method to be adopted by the seeker. He called the technique as vipassana, which may be roughly translated as the special way of seeing, consists of non-involved witnessing, as one sees a traffic on the road or the flow of water in a river. Yoga Vasishta gives innumerable hints to achieve the quiescence from all mental activity. In the Sampatti Prakarana, it gives the origin of the ahankara, I-ness, and in Sthiti Prakarana, its sustenance. Stories therein illustrates very clearly that the root of this world is the ahankara, and that they have the same root in the ultimate reality, which transcends all movement and change. But the ahankara, and subsequently the world of objects, are only its manifestations and are like waves on the ocean. Having their origin, they get nurtured to grow, and due to this very fact, they necessarily decay and finally die. The episode under discussion has 10 sargas, which directly or indirectly give practical hints for quietening the mental activity. It is said of a Sufi master Salih that he used to keep repeating to his disciples that whoever keeps knocking continually, the door shall be opened to him. One day, Rabia, another extraordinary woman Sufi master, was passing by. She observed that the master cannot keep telling his disciples that the door shall be opened because the door was never closed. The story does not say anything about the reply of Master Salih. Evidently, he did not say anything. Superficially, the story appears to be suggesting that Master Salih was wrong and Master Rabia corrected him. But we should remember that Master Salih was an enlightened master and had awakened many disciples and had led them towards enlightenment. Actually, this story clarifies a great paradox in spirituality. There have been two main streams of approach in spirituality. One has always stressed that the seeker has to put a lot of effort to achieve the goal of enlightenment, that the effort must be without any break, and that the effort is never wasted, and even if one dies without achieving what one strived for, she or he will be taking up the search in the next births to ultimately triumph. This has been the approach of most of the schools of yoga and Vedanta. The seeker has to make all kinds of preparations for experiencing the truth. The second just asks the seeker to drop the ego. Obviously, the second stream is meant for only the select few who have come to a very ripe state wherein the ego is about to fall off on its own. After the experience, the seeker invariably feels that it had been always there, within the reach, but only in his ignorance he felt otherwise. A person who has that experience feels why and how can anyone possibly miss it? Such persons normally do not and perhaps cannot be of much help to the struggling seekers because they have transcended the turmoil of all mental activity and may not be able to come down to the so-called ordinary plane of consciousness. While some of the enlightened masters, in their compassion for the struggling humanity, can and do come down to the level of the seekers to become a bridge between mind and the reality which transcends all mind. In this sense, in the story under discussion, Rabia represents the state of an enlightened person who wonders how the obvious truth is not known by others, and Salih, that of a compassionate master who has come down to the level of his disciples to lead them by hand and to spread the infection of enlightenment. In the strictest sense, there is nothing like a royal road to enlightenment. There possibly cannot be, as each seeker is unique and singular. Even then, there are very broad guidelines to achieve the quiescence from all activity. This sarga starts with a useful hint from sage Vasishtha. He said that the infatuation towards samsara is prolonged by two gunas, rajas and tamas, just as a building is supported by the firm pillars. And the courageous endowed by the sattva guna drop the attraction like a snake molting its skin, as a realization dawns on them that everything verily is only a manifestation of the reality. The illusion of separateness gets dissolved. One of the most wonderful contributions of Indian darshanas and culture to spirituality is the concept of three gunas. The term gunas can be taken as rope, characteristic, quality, or mental state by which one gets tied down to the inert and the insentient. Or the three gunas can be also taken as three different influences under which every human mind plays such an endless variety of roles at different moments in its changing environment. The concept has been clarified by many of our scriptures. The Bhagavad Gita even devotes a complete chapter for it. In the present context, sattva can be taken in as non-activity, a complete mastery over activity, light of wisdom and balance. Rajas as activity, helpless activity, involvement and restlessness. And tamas to be inactivity, inertia, ignorance and covering. These gunas are born with the manifestation and are part of nature. They generate a feeling of attachment and successfully create the delusion. In other words, these gunas are part of the dream called the samsara, which gets manifested with the initial sankalpa, the tendency to think. To wake up from this dream, one has to first realize that one is under the influence of a dream. This is where the experience of pain, misery, and death, as well as the knowledge of impermanence of everything, comes to our rescue. After being repeatedly afflicted by the turmoil of the opposites which constitute life, one starts thinking seriously about the meaning and goal of all life. As the dispassion dawns and a disinterest in the mundane existence gets nourished, one is ready to make efforts to wake up from that dream. This is done by retracing the steps of manifestation by making use of sattva, the least powerful of the three gunas. That is why, throughout the scripture, the sage keeps repeating that one should overcome the ashubha vasanas characterized by rajasic and tamasic tendencies with the help of shubha vasanas, which are mainly sattvic tendencies. The sage then proceeded to suggest Rama to adopt the attitude that this whole universe is only a manifestation of the ultimate reality and is not separate from it. This view helps in elimination of the separateness resulting from I and mine. With the elimination of separateness, there will be neither misery nor infatuation, neither birth nor the one who is born, and one will be able to see everything as it is. One will transcend the pair of opposites, ever sattvic, unconcerned about retaining one's position and also about avoiding the problems. One will be equanimous, happy in and with oneself, stable-minded, peaceful, silent within and without, pure like a crystal. Whatever comes to one's lot is accepted totally without any expectation from anyone or any action. These qualities will help the seeker to be vijwaraha, vigatatapatrayaha, vijwaraha, vigatatapatrayaha, one who has transcended the difficulties on three different planes of body, mind and ahankara. A person who has the above qualities is in his last birth and the Atma-jnana dawns easily to him. Such persons are called the Aryas, who are compassionate and full of love, who accept everything as it is and are filled with wisdom. Such persons attract all people like the melody of a flute attracting the attention of even the cows. Broadly, there are two types of paths leading to moksha. In the first type, one follows the instructions given by the Guru, to whom one surrenders everything, and one is enveloped by the truth and jnana in the very birth, failing which the seeker continues in the future births what had been learnt in the previous birth and ultimately receives the benediction. On the other path, a person being endowed with a stainless mind becomes recipient of spontaneous jnana, like a fruit falling unexpectedly from above. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell a beautiful parable to illustrate the spontaneous enlightenment. A tantric practiced in a deep forest. He was almost at the end of his sadhana. All that required was that he should sit and meditate by sitting on a consecrated corpse. A traveler on his way home came to the spot and was curious to see the tantric busy in his spiritual practices. The tantric had finished preparing his meditation seat by worshipping the corpse when the wayfarer heard a tiger's roar. Immediately he climbed a tree to protect himself, but the tantric, unaware and busy in his practice, was attacked by the tiger and was dragged away. Seeing that there was no danger, the pilgrim got down and, just out of curiosity, sat on the consecrated corpse. Immediately, Mother Kali appeared and offered him a boon. The man was surprised and asked the goddess that while the person who had really worked for the mother's vision had become the tiger's meal, he who had been totally ignorant of the spiritual ways had the privilege of her vision. The goddess smilingly replied that it was destined that the tantric should become the tiger's meal, while the traveler had to only sit on the corpse, as he had the necessary purity of mind. This story just goes to suggest that there is no beaten track, no hard and fast rule in spirituality. In fact, we have to always remember that each one of us is unique and has a unique and singular approach to enlightenment. Consequently, each one of us has to discover the method for herself or himself. After the discovery, one starts treading the path, and if she or he is unable to achieve the transcendence in that very life, one may get it in the next birth, though it may appear to be unexpected. The revered sage Vasishtha then proceeded to narrate the story of one such person who became such a recipient of Atma Jnana. King Janaka ruled over a region called Videha, known for his wealth, liberality, fearlessness, and the sense of justice. One day in spring, he was strolling in the royal garden and was feeling attuned to the nature around. Then he heard some ethereal voices of the Siddhas who had withdrawn themselves from the visible world. Through their songs, they were giving some wonderful hints for vichara, the meditative contemplation. One was singing that the Atma Jnana arises as one succeeds in merging the knower and the known. Another sang that one should meditate on the reality after eradicating the vasanas for sense objects to experience the eagle vision. The third Siddha intoned that after becoming all-expansive by identifying with the neutral center between Sat, the existence, and Asat, the non-existence, one should be with the Atman, the light which lights up all the lights. Still another declared that one should contemplate on the effulgent Atman, which is the I in all jivas or beings. Another Siddha joined in, said that searching for the God without and neglecting the God within is like abandoning the precious Kaunstubha and going after the ordinary shells on the beach, and that unless one completely overcomes the lesser desires, Atman can never be attained, and those who continue their involvement and indulgence with the gross, in spite of their knowledge, should be called as the donkeys, which can only carry the burden without ever knowing what they are carrying. Through the rod of discrimination, the sense serpents can be disciplined at the level of the mind itself. Moksha is attained when the mind has been totally quietened. Having heard the songs of Siddhas, Janaka was panic-stricken like a serpent being stunned by the sight of an angry eagle. Leaving the cool and fragrant royal garden, he went into his mansion to contemplate on the truths he had heard from the Siddhas. His own life and of others came in front of his eyes. All the actions emanate from the helpless restlessness. As his mind became introvertish, it became obvious to him that compared to the eternity of time, the human life was but a moment, and the human size was but a speck in the infinite space. And with the realization came a surprise as to how could he possibly squander away the invaluable life on things which are gross, impermanent, and energy dissipating. Antarmukhata, the inward flow of the mind, brought in the realization that the main culprit and the root cause of all the disturbance, misery, and the cycle of birth and death is mind. With this very vision, King Janaka dropped it and transcended the activity and the turmoil called mind. After a long time, when he came down to the so-called normal plane of consciousness, the understanding continued, and he decided to continue his responsibility as the head of the country and to devote his life towards spontaneous actions without any trace of the kartritva, the doership, and came to be known to the posterity as the enlightened king and an adept in karma yoga, so much so that even Lord Krishna takes his example in Bhagavad Gita. Concluding the story, sage Vasishta told Rama that Janaka attained Atmajnana through the grace of the Siddhas, whom he considered as his gurus. That the precious most jewel of Atmajnana is very much in every heart, though it is covered by the vasanas like desire and hatred. And if one attains to jnana, nothing will afflict such a person, just as the person wearing a diamond armor is not at all affected by the poisonous arrows, and the person aspiring for the Brahmic state should be free of all desires. Many stories have been attributed to King Janaka, and this is only one of them. Janaka's name has been mentioned not only in Ramayana but in other Vedantic scriptures like the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad and the Ashtavakra Gita. Efforts have been made by the scholars to find out whether it is the same Janaka or different persons having the same name. However, more pragmatic persons have totally avoided the involvement in the eternal debate of historic dates of our saints and sages and have derived benefit out of the teachings and hints found in the various scriptures. In this scripture, the name appears to be symbolic rather than historical. Janaka means the progenitor or father. He is said to be ruling over the king of Videha, that which transcends the body. The present context seems to suggest that it is the ahankara which has transcended the body consciousness. At this level, one is bound to experience the poise, and there is no disturbance from the desires and their companions. And this very poise helps one to be more receptive to the truth that always surrounds us. It has been accepted in the field of spirituality that whoever makes any effort whatsoever towards understanding oneself, the help appears. In fact, it is not that it appears, but the help is already there, only that one becomes open and receptive to it. The greatest impediments for receptivity is the wall of activity called the mind. Normally what happens is that we see or hear only that which is conditioned by our mind. The conditioning is of the likes and dislikes and the impressions based on the limited self as well as the selfishness. If one succeeds in crossing over the barricade, as in the case of King Janaka in this story, one gets the vital hints for the methodology of vichara unasked. The fact that one is in a state of receptivity shows that the activity of the mind has reduced to a very great extent. And for one who is in the state where the activity of mind has been quietened, it is not very difficult to trace the origin of ahankara. When one succeeds to achieve this Janaka state, where the ahambhava, the feeling of I, is free of any other manifestation, one is able to separate oneself from the drishta, drishya and darshana. In that very vision, the involvement gets dropped on its own. Similarly, all such hints only trigger off the quiescence. In fact, anything and everything helps one to achieve the quiescence. After enlightenment, one spends the remaining time in one's body blissfully, depending upon one's nature and aptitude, either performing spontaneous actions like Janaka and others like him did, or by just remaining silent, spreading the fragrance of enlightenment. The ocean seems invincible and destructive with all its tall waves reaching out to the sky. But deep within it, everything is calm and silent, so much so, nothing happens to it when even the rivers in spate come rushing and merge in it. The waves, no matter how high and destructive, do come down to become the limitless and calm ocean. Similarly, all activity is only superficial and temporary. This is more so as far as our inner life is concerned. Identifying ourselves with the material world, senses, desires, and depressions, we are invariably tossed and turned in the world. A glimpse in the silent depth convinces that activity has relevance to it only with the reference to its depth. And such a glimpse is possible only when one completely transcends the superficial activity at the periphery, when one is able to move towards the center of aham vritti, the vibration called I, which the Janaka, ruling over Videha, the region transcending the gross manifestations like body, senses, and mind.